Joe, a couple of things where you've spoken about kind of molting, like expansion. I really like that as a definition of success because you see some people, it's always kind of frustrating in a sense when you feel like they go the opposite way, like they're kind of
Yeah.
retracting throughout their
Yeah.
life. Which look, as we go through transitions, and certainly professional sport can be one of those, you come out of it earlier than
Yeah.
people do in most careers. It, Without kind of proactively trying to do something, it's very easy
Yeah.
to retract rather than expand.
Yeah.
And you've spoken about a few things there, so I'm just trying to sort of get this sense in my head of going outside of your comfort zone and expanding. Is that where you
Hmm.
think you really find your authentic self?
Yeah.
Can you be your authentic self if you don't sort of try and search for it and maybe put yourself in uncomfortable positions?
John, the I call them anti-molters. Those are the people who seem to get I say there's five dangers to anti-molting, and I'm searching for them now. But what you talk about, oh, so it's, yeah, the five dangers of anti-molting essentially is you're stunted, you're shallow, you're scared, you're stagnant, and you're sad. And
Okay.
what you speak about is really being stunted, right? And shallow. And there's no
Hmm.
growth. And we live in a world that is constantly changing. That is the only guarantee is change. And if you're not
Mm.
changing with it, then you're essentially dead. I hate to be morbid, but you're not learning and growing and living. You're not thriving. You're surviving. And so
Mhm.
many of us show up every morning to survive, not to thrive. And that thriving comes from learning more about yourself, right? And that's the five qualities of being a molter. One is curiosity. If you don't have a deep sense of curiosity about who you are and who
Mm.
you want to become and who the people are around you, you're never going to tap into the side of your brain that allows you to get into the flow state, right? Like we speak about flow state on this podcast of really being present and without thought about the past and the future. You are so present and you are so fulfilled in that moment. That is the flow state of what you're doing. There's no way of accessing the flow state of deep learning, of deep focus without understanding that you have to be curious and you have to want to learn. So if you're an expert or like you work in a niche, you just have to be careful about not getting too fragile, right? Not getting too narrow-minded because like we talked about, diversity is our superpower. And if you're not getting ideas from other
Mhm.
people, if you're not learning from other sources, then you are stagnant and you are stifled financially, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. You are stifled and you are shallow. And those people, they're not great to be around. I'm going to be honest, right? Like they're not the people that you get that energy from. And very often they're sad because a lot of what I'm talking about are avenues of building deep connections with others. If I'm not interested in learning about you, John, I can't build a connection with you.
Mm.
And building deep connections with other humans is such a huge piece of happiness. It's such a huge piece of longevity. So if we eliminate that piece, then we're going to be sad, right? We're not going to have that happiness from the deep relationships we can form with each other.
Yeah, is there anything from a practical advice point of view, if you ever come across someone that's um, at that point of perhaps stagnation or
Yeah.
being stifled or something like that, what can they do to, kind of push themselves, go and
Yeah.
expand?
Yeah. I mean, we all have forces that are holding us back. We all have our own limitations. And then society, thankfully, right? Thanks to all of us, it places limitations on us. We have norms, we have conventions, like racially, we have it sexual orientation wise, we have it gender wise, we have stereotypes, we have narratives that play over and over in your head. Question your own narratives, question your own limitations, and ask yourself, who do I want to be, right? Ask yourself, who do I want to be? Write down one thing that is holding you back from being that person and attack it.
Mm.
Maybe it's a long held belief that, you know what, just isn't true. Maybe it's a fear that you can't overcome. Maybe it's just closing the knowledge and doing gap. Maybe it's just literally waking up and stepping out your front door. It doesn't have to be revolutionary, It can literally be making your bed in the morning, right? Like something that is holding you back from being the person that you want to be. We all have those limitations. Write it down, attack it. Set a goal to attack it that next week, that next day. Write it in your journal, right? We're more likely to do it when we write it down. So just being really deliberate and thinking about it. I think we rarely ask ourselves, who do I want to be? I think we rarely ask ourselves because we're stuck in the wheel, right? We're stuck in the rat race and we don't ever get a chance to self-reflect. So sit down, have some quiet time, ask yourself who you want to be, and then write down one reason why you're not that person today.
Yeah, that's great. Because look, life gets so busy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Finding time to reflect. It is something that you actually have to be deliberate.
Yeah.
About doing. And look, I guess habit become a sort of a foundation for beliefs. Once something just becomes habitual, it kind of becomes, well, I must be this person because this is what I do.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of power in the pause. And what's interesting now is we live in a world full of constant distractions. So we rarely ever pause. We rarely ever sit with our own thoughts. And one of my favorite books that I read recently was called The Self-Driven Child. And it's written, one of the authors is basically a neuroscientist, and he talks about the default mode network in our brain, that doing nothing, deliberately doing nothing, sitting with our own thoughts, activates a part of our brain that doesn't get activated when we're staring at something or doing work or having a task-oriented type of experience. If we sit and do nothing, we're actually doing something. And those are the moments that we're able to self-reflect. Those are the moments that we're able to develop empathy and compassion, because we're like, ooh, I didn't like myself in that moment. Like I could have been better. Or I was super proud of myself when I did X, Y, or Z. And I think the power in the pause of really being deliberate and scheduling in, it sounds cheesy, but like scheduling in pauses, like once a month on the 15th, I'm going to spend half the day just like reflecting on who Joe is. And am I going in the direction that I want to go in? Should I shift? Should I, pivot? Because life is always changing. I need to change with it. So it's really asking yourself these tough questions in deliberate moments.
That's really interesting, Joe. It's a little bit. I've just been reading something about boredom, because boredom cuts two ways. You can either create brownout, or in young children, apparently, and John might correct me on this, boredom is a source of creativity.
Absolutely.
If a child is bored, they'll go and find something that interests them.
Yeah.
But adults don't do that so much.
No.
Why not?
I think we compete to see who's busiest. We compete to see who has the least amount of time. That is a world that we live in now, because that's how we define success. Yeah. It's results driven, outcome based. It is black and white. It is how many trophies can you win? And that means we have to spend all of our time doing, not being. We have to do something. And we live in a world where more is better. And we seldom sit back and ask ourselves, is more really better? Right? Like I'm on a race to nowhere. Where am I running? Like, let's just slow down.
Do you think there's a link to this idea that you put out earlier about the sense of who you are or who you could be? Because, I mean, it's a long time since I was a child, but I do remember when I was in school, I just felt I was one of a class. I didn't see myself as being in a role compared to the others. When I started work and I started my career, you become very aware of roles and status and stuff like that. And you suddenly find yourself in boxes. Yeah. And I for one found that quite challenging to deal with.
Yeah. I think you're 100% accurate, Doug. And the best year of my life was 5th grade. The best year of my life was 5th grade because I felt I could be 100% myself. It was before all of the pressures society places on you were in place. I was a tomboy. I felt more comfortable with mud on my knees than I did in a dress. I got my first pair of Air Jordans. All my friends were boys. I was the top pick at recess. I was the most popular kid in school. It was absolute pure innocence. And that is 100% because I did not feel boxed in by society's definition of who I should be as a young woman. I could have one foot in a boy, one foot in a girl. I was a tomboy, right? Like it was so beautiful. And I distinctively remember 6th grade having to become a quote unquote girl. I bought like the ugliest pink clothes. I like I could only sit with girls at lunchtime. And there was this shift because society wants us in clean, nice boxes, right? Different is dangerous. We are afraid of what we don't know. So I'm going to label you and I'm going to put you in a clean box so I feel more comfortable, because you're a threat to me if I don't understand who you are. So it does get challenging as you get older to consistently defy what those expectations are, what those stereotypes are. And again, we have to be deliberate and ask ourselves, like, are these conventions, are these labels, are they serving who I am? Or are they holding me back? And I wouldn't be a lesbian with a mohawk if I wasn't able to defy some sort of convention that society was placing on me. And I still face a ton of resistance. I'm too masculine to be a woman. I walk into a bathroom and, people do a double take. People call me sir all the time. And it is uncomfortable, so uncomfortable. Yet, if I can make someone else who walks behind me, who looks a little bit like me or may defy some sort of stereotype, feel more comfortable in their skin, then my job is done, right? So I'm expanding society by being who I am. So that's going again from the micro of like finding Joe's own authenticity to the macro of pushing society to be a little bit more accepting of people who don't look like you want them to look.
Do you think, I think it's a great topic. I think there's a real role for mental toughness to play in it. People often think that when you talk about mental toughness, you're talking about toughies and weakies. You're not really. You're talking about your mental approach to things. So how I think about something. And I think one of the most insidious forms of blocks to diversity and inclusion is not skin color or even gender. It's you don't think like me.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? And that underpins all forms of discrimination.
Yeah.
And I think if we've got, we may in time develop the power to do something with that idea. It's still sort of kind of, forming in our heads here.
Yeah, we live in a society now that's very polarized. And unfortunately, there's two sides of a coin, and we don't live on the spectrum anymore, right? There's no middle ground. And we see that politically here in the United States. And it's hard. It's really hard. I wanted to challenge myself and just speak to someone because I live in Washington, D.C., which is a very progressive community. And even I was thinking about, like, am I getting too siloed, right? In my own space, do I need to reach out and speak to someone who is pro-life, right? Versus pro-choice? Do I need to speak to someone who doesn't believe in gay marriage? Do I need to speak to someone who Roe versus Wade? There's all these situations that we're finding ourselves on one side or the other, and we're finding it impossible to reach across the aisle, right? That's what we're finding. And there's a lot of danger to it. There is, because we just get more angry and upset, and we become this culture of blame and shame, and it's not really serving us, I don't think.
No, that's a link to the research you want to do, John, isn't it?
Yeah, last couple of days actually, we've been talking about how I suppose whether mental toughness could have a role in the capacity to sort of engage with other people's opinions.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to have a level of comfort in your own kind of self to be able to accept that you're wrong. So there's some good studies out there on like intellectual humility.
Yeah.
The extent to which you're kind of prepared to go, okay, I've formed an opinion on this.
Yeah.
But also recognizing that some of my opinions I hold dearly, and I might also be pretty clear on the evidence behind them. Some of my opinions might be quite dear to me, but I have to have that kind of humility to recognize that, geez, I'm not an expert, even though I think this is an important thing, because there's so many things to have an opinion about, and we're told to have an opinion about things, and like you say, no one sits on the edge of the coin.
And I think if you study the best leaders, they are willing to change their mind. They are willing to hear other opinions. Of course, they have their convictions. They have their values that they stand deeply in, but they want the opinions of the people they trust around them. And, I was reading a lot about Andy Reid, the head coach of the Chiefs, who just won the Super Bowl. And that's really what a lot of people say about him, is just how open and willing he is at his age to really like change his mind, and to grow and to develop and to evolve. And that's the beauty of it, is the evolution again of humanity, that we're going to be different tomorrow than we are today. And if not, then you really are stuck in place, and you can't lead a group of people unless you model the behavior you want to see out of them. Right. And
that's challenging, right? Because I think every single one of us, like left unchallenged, whether it's by ourselves or someone else, will hold stereotypes. Like we're all ignorant until we find out, more about something. Is that then something you would look for in kind of authentic leadership, that kind of reflection, taking that morning a month to reflect, well, actually, what am I, not just limiting beliefs to myself, but maybe stereotypical beliefs that I hold towards others?
Yes. And I think research shows that companies that take strategic pauses, that ask themselves, what direction are we going, are the ones that actually are more profitable, right? And they have the leaders who are willing to question themselves. And that takes you have to have a deep amount of confidence to be able to question yourself and still stand in your own 2 feet, right? To still know that I can say, I don't know to this question, and people won't think I'm an idiot, or people won't think that I'm weak, right? And this is redefining success. This is redefining authentic leadership, is not needing the right answer to every question. If you have everything figured out, then you have nothing figured out, and people will see through you. That is very transparent. And people don't want to follow a leader like that. They want to follow a leader who admits their own imperfections and admits when they don't know something. That's a leader I want to follow. And it has nothing to do with the job title. It has nothing to do with the captain's armband. It has to do with how you show up in the world and how comfortable you are in your own skin to be able to hear other people's thoughts and ideas and actually listen.
One last question. I'm conscious of time, Joe. You've recently become a parent to a beautiful daughter, Luna.
Yeah.
How's that going? And what's it doing to your mental toughness?
It is a daily test and progress of my mental toughness, Doug. And I say that because you really create an environment of monotonous routine to only exist in complete unpredictability, which is something that I've never really been a part of. I mean, yes and no. So it's so challenging. And I promised myself before Luna was born that, and the first words I wanted to say to her were, and which I did, I trust you. And I think trust is the highest form of love. And I trust is playing the long game, right? It's knowing that I'm not going to have the answer today. I may not have the answer tomorrow. I may not have the answer a couple of years from now, but I trust that we're going to grow together. And I trust that I can raise her in a way that she's going to write her own story. This isn't about me. And I want to give her that space to write her own story. And I think that's what great authentic leadership is giving people space to be their own heroes and to fall down and to pick themselves back up again and to experience all the beautiful emotions that life can bring our way, good and bad. It's all part of the process. And I look forward to seeing how she grows through it.
That's brilliant, Joe. And you've actually introduced us to another word. It's going to be part of the mental toughness vocabulary. We're going to be moulting all over the place.
Yes, hashtag molts. We're gonna get the swag. I'll get you guys some t-shirts.
Yeah, I only ever associated it with whiskey in the past. Oh.
Yes, I love it.
I suppose we should ask as well. If anybody wanted to get in touch with you, Joe, what is the best way?
I would encourage them to go to my website. It's joannalohman.com. So JoannaLohman.com. Just kind of redesigned it, made it a bit more colorful, and really highlighting my keynote speaking. And also I'm in a grad program now, speaking of evolution and moulting, to up level my speaking and my performing. So I'm excited to bring it to stages around the world.
Thanks a million, Joe.